Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Tell me a creepy story, preferably a real one that actually happened to you or someone you know.
So this happened at my best friend's house back in 2003. We were 14 at the time. The memory is still quite vivid in my mind, as it is and is from what he tells me. Best bros, edgy metalheads. Always get together on weekends to watch some horror movies. Most of them slasher and gory B titles from the 80s. We'd stay awake till late in the night watching these movies. We'd usually watch as many as 6 or 7 in a row. We were night owls, so none of us would sleep before the sun's rising. On one particular Saturday, we decide we want something else other than these gory movies only, so we go for something a little bit spookier and less bloody. With the exception of Evil Dead, I can't really remember what movies we ended picking up. They were mostly generic, trashy, no-name 80s horror movies. So we get our hands on said movies, go to his house, order our pizzas, and start binge watching those bad boys. So because it's such a classic, we start by watching Evil Dead. Once it comes to an end, we start randomly picking the next ones. Watch another one. And another. This is quite boring. What the hell, these are mostly garbage. Around midnight and I'm already sleepy, which is rather uncommon. Probably because these are garbage. Kind of getting mad at my friend because of his poor choice of movies. Even though we decided together which ones we'd watch that day, they were mostly his recommendations. He says he's also pissed at his own failure. So he suggests we just try some good old Jason. But the only one he has available is Jason X. Whatever, mate, let's watch it. Now, I didn't mention it previously, but this takes place in a third world country, so back then we were still using VCRs. Watching that Jason X. Jason smacked that blonde's head like you mean it, you go girl. It's probably around 1 a.m. or something by now. See and hear friend snoring. The hell? When did this dude fall asleep? But realize that I've been feeling pretty sleepy during the last few minutes too. And quite comfy this spot I find myself in. Sort of cold today. Maybe if I just get some shut-eye. Sleep. Wake up. Wake up. Look at the clock. Not much time has passed since I went to sleep. It's 1:40 something by now. Friend is glued in front of the screen. He quickly notices I woke up.
Look.
The guy is basically screaming.
Look at this. What the hell is this?
Approach TV. Vision still kinda blurry. I don't see anything, mate. Just look, he insists. So I fix my eyes on the TV. Start to notice that there's actually something in there. Other than static, I mean. But why is there static? Jason should still be playing. Realize there's something weird now. Keep looking at the TV. Static seems to be forming into something. Little by little it starts to resemble a face. We just look at each other dumbfounded and not sure what to do. This face is pretty distorted and among the static, so can't see it quite well. It seems to have pitch black eyes. No nose. It's definitely a face though. It's opening its mouth. Mouth has pointy teeth and it looks like it's screaming, but no sound comes out of it. Pretty spooked by now. Friend says screw it and decides to turn off the TV. Static. Static. Face getting more discernible. A strange, faint and raspy sound seems to be emitting from TV. Friend goes in and presses the TV's power on and off button. Nothing happens. What? Maybe the button is broken. Try the remote. Try the power on and off button on the remote. Nothing happens. Think he's somehow screwing with me. Press the eject button on the VCR. Tape won't come out. You what mate? JPEG. Calls me a punk for not believing him. I go behind the TV. Unplug the TV's cable from the outlet. Makes the turning off noise. But the static and face continue on screen. We just sit there looking at each other and looking at it without knowing what to do. Another 4 or 5 minutes go by, no one says a word. Suddenly screen goes completely black. No static, no face anymore. Go on and press the eject button on the VCR. It works now. Tape comes out. Insert tape again, turn TV on again. Maybe there was something wrong with the tape. Try playing it. It plays normally. Fast forward to the end. Nothing unusual. WTF just happened? We just sit there not knowing what to do for another good hour or so. I don't remember exactly what we told each other to feel better about ourselves, but we end up going to sleep not long after the event. Anticlimactic end for sure, but that's that for the day. A few months later, I got my first computer and went on the internet. I used dial-up at the time and started looking for possible answers. I ended up finding something called instrumental transcommunication, which seems to be what we experienced. It's in the category of EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. The term instrumental transcommunication was coined by Ernst Sankowski in the 1970s to refer more generally to communication through any sort of electronic device such as tape recorders, fax machines, television sets, or computers between spirits or other discarnate entities and the living. In 1997, Emance Barras, of the Department of Psychology at the University of Western Ontario, conducted a series of experiments using the methods of EVP investigator Konstantin Radov and the work of instrumental transcommunication researcher Mark Macy as a guide. A radio was tuned to an empty frequency, and over 81 sessions, a total of 60 hours and 11 minutes of recordings were collected. During recordings, a person either sat in silence or attempted to make verbal contact with potential sources of EVP. Barras stated that he did record several events that sounded like voices, but they were too few and too random to represent viable data and too open to interpretation to be described definitively as EVP.
I was camping in Colorado once with a group of friends. There were about 6 of us. We set up camp in a sweet rock outcrop where there were 3 large boulders leaning against each other with a hole at the top and enough room to sit underneath. This was during a fire ban, so it was the perfect place to put our campfire, so we set up the tent not far off. Middle of the night comes and we are running out of firewood. We remember a campsite nearby that had nobody there during the day and plenty of wood, but we had been hearing voices all evening. Just talking, nothing strange, and assumed it was that nearby campsite. So we walked over to ask if we could borrow some wood and chop some more to return it the next morning. The campsite was still completely empty at night. There was a Jeep there, and we figured the campers may have gotten stuck while four-wheeling during the day and were sleeping in their vehicle. So we grabbed some firewood with the intent to replace it in the morning and walked back to camp. There were no other campsites we saw nearby when hiking earlier in the day, so we were discussing on the way back where the voices talking were coming from, but figured we just missed another nearby camp. Anyway, we are back at camp and winding down, me and one buddy taking shifts keeping the fire going and chatting a little and dozing off, and the rest of our group had headed to the tent and started sleeping. And we started hearing what we figured were coyotes or foxes. They can make weird guttural screams that sound like people. But we kept hearing footsteps around the camp, mostly gravel, and going out of our cave to check, make sure no coyotes were in camp, and never saw anything. Weird screaming persisted all night. Next day comes around and we replace the wood at the empty nearby campsite, pack up, and get ready to leave after a morning hike. It was a difficult 4-wheel trail to get out, and one of my buddies got stuck on an incline and slid back. We started trying to dig him out, and I, being at the top of the incline but in a vehicle that wouldn't help, drove up the trail to find nearby campsites and see if someone had a rig with a winch that would go quicker. I approached probably 15 campsites along the trails over a couple hours, every one of them completely empty and abandoned. The entire area had no human life. Generators, trucks, jeeps all just left at the campsite in the middle of the day. No luck, so I went back to the site where my buddy was stuck, and we got him dug out in the middle of afternoon and started to leave. The entire area on the way out was completely abandoned. Tons of camps near the trailhead and literally nobody at any campsite. It became really eerie, and we were trying to figure out if what we had heard the night before was actual coyotes or what. Anyway, a few days later some bodies appeared in the area in the local news. Said they had died from unknown causes. There were about 4 over the entire area we were camping. No idea if the screams we heard were people or not. And no idea where the talking was coming from to this day. Not super scary, but eerie enough.
That day I went hiking on a lonesome island in Maine. Everything was nice and chill, lovely sun, still weather, beautiful forests all around. Then after some time I stumbled upon a strange place with stick piles and figures across the area. It seemed so weird to me, since I've never encountered anything like that before. And those stick figures reminded me of an old movie about first British settlers in Blair County, New England. I took a walk among those trees and tried to videotape that place a bit. With every step I was taking, almost in a semi-delusional state, the deeper I was entering that maze, I was feeling more and more worried, endangered. There was something very strange about that feeling, as if something was calling me to go further and further, and I couldn't resist, despite the rising fear. Then suddenly, the thunder-like crashing noise fell upon me from the clear blue skies. I looked above. Nothing. There was nothing at all. And the sound repeated again and again with rising strength. I was completely disturbed, looking with my eyesight among the branches of ancient pines, trying to stare in the eyes of my enemy. But there was nothing, as if some kind of ghost was playing his deadly game with me. I wanted to scream, "Who are you? Show yourself! What do you want from me?" But my voice was frozen, just like in a nightmare. Heavy knocking, crashing, crunching. Something was there. I couldn't withstand the pressure anymore and gathered all the remaining of my will and strength, slowly started to walk back towards the light, towards the green zone, since this place was completely dead, no signs of life at all, not a single grass, not a single flower, nothing but doomed deadlands. One step, another step, the light is closer, and here I am, back in the safety and peace. Everything is gone. All the heavy feelings and hypnotizing force left me once and for all. Everything was over. I didn't think twice about leaving this place ASAP. Without looking back, I headed straight towards an old bridge that was connecting this cursed island with the blessed and blossoming mainland. It was getting dark. The quickly upcoming twilight made that island look even more mysterious and doom from the distance. But every glance I was taking of it, turning my head back, speeding up my footsteps, I felt as if some part of me was left up there forever. And that place was laughingly whispering to me with the rising wind, that one day or another I will come back and will not find my way out from there. Never.
In 4th grade, there was a rumor that a witch lived across the street from the school. A group of us would gather along a chain-link fence that looked across a busy street to her house. We'd taunt the house and mock her like little rude kids, but we never saw her. One day before lunch, this girl, who first told us about this witch, said the witch was going to be on the sidewalk across the street looking for one of us to take. Our class was about 5 classrooms down from the same chained fence, but further down from this supposed witch's house. Before lunch, our teacher lined us up as usual, then marched us to the cafeteria. Not an ounce of fear was in my heart, because first and foremost, we've never seen anyone living there. Not only that, but this was all make-believe in my mind, you know? Well, when we marched out that door, I was anxious to look down that hall. Well, I wish I hadn't, because sure as hell I swear on everything there was an old lady across the street hunching over like she was trying to get a better look at us. I was literally petrified with fear. She was there until we rounded the corner. I still try to rationalize why she would be there. Maybe kids threw rocks or was done with kids staring at her house and she had our lunch routine down. Super gnarly, though only bizarre thing that's happened to me as a child. I haven't messaged my friend in a few years, but usually when I do, I bring this event up. She tells me she doesn't remember how she knew that witch was going to be there, and then we both laugh it off and that's it. It was Conway Elementary in Escondido, California, the fence along El Norte Parkway. I was in the classrooms closest to the fence if someone wanted to Google Maps for a better picture.
So one night a friend was supposed to come over to my place and I was waiting for him. I live in a small town, not much goes on after dark and nobody really goes out. I get out from my house and stand by the fence waiting for him. I see a human-shaped figure walk towards me. I naturally think it's my buddy and I wave. Doesn't wave back. I wave again. Nothing. Just guess it wasn't him. The lighting was really bad anyway. To his left there is a river and he can't turn anywhere. So I just wait until he approaches, see him walking toward me for a solid minute. All of a sudden a car speeds by and he vanishes. A minute later my friend comes by and asks me why am I so confused, and I tell him this story. He brushes it off as nothing and just says we go play some League.
Okay, I have some stories from when I was a kid. The first story starts when I was around 3 or 4 in Oregon. I live in a college town near the college campus with my brother, sister, mother, and father. My mom was studying to be a teacher. We were a lower middle-class family at the time and just moved out of an apartment. Our house was a 1-story, 3-bedroom house. Had to sleep on the same goddamn bed with my brother. It was a twin size too. He was taller than me and I was fatter than him, so it was a clash of the titans to see who got more room. It was night time and I was fast asleep. I suddenly woke up feeling a little lighter, which was weird for a chubby boy. Then I had a sensation of me being plopped on the bed. Keep in mind that I was already on the bed and not sleeping in another room. After that I fell on the ground. I was going to cry from the shock of being randomly woken up but couldn't. I sat up and saw the door open. Now my fright levels were high. But I heard my mother's voice coming from the darkness, saying, "Don't worry, Mijo, we're Hispanics, I'm here to protect you, come here, I will give you a hug." Feeling less scared, I did the dumb thing and got up to get my hug. I hugged my mom and then she vanished saying, "Goodbye, Mijo." I didn't want her to go, so I started crying. Then everyone woke up to see what's going on. Seeing my mom come from her room, I gave her a big hug saying don't go. After a month or two we left the house because of something that was blurry to me. I will continue with the other 2 stories, they're creepier, trust me, tomorrow. Okay, Hispanic Oregon anon back and insomnia has taken over, so you guys get another story. This happened 2 years after we moved from Mom's ghost house. I live in a much nicer, bigger house. 2 stories, 3 bedroom, 3 bathroom house. Felt like crap while we were on our way to school. I told my mom that I might throw up. She got a little skeptical but was accepting cause it was flu season. Mom took me back at the house and I felt happy because screw school, yay video games and cartoons. She gave me medicine and told me to go to sleep. I went upstairs and went to bed. I couldn't sleep though because it was morning. I heard a slam from downstairs. It startled me, thinking it was Mother figuring out I was lying or something, and she's coming up with the belt or chancla to give me a whapping. But it wasn't coming up the stairs. Rather, angry Mom stayed down there with more angry Mutters. After a while it did start coming up, but the more it came up the less it sounded, less like Mom. More male and full of hate. The angry Mutters stopped at my bedroom door and no sounds came. Then a few seconds go by and a burst of noises fill my room consisting of gunshots, yelling, etc. I cupped my ears and ran out of my room crying, going to the bathroom. When I reached the bathroom I locked the door and cried, but the hate noise ball did not follow me anymore, so it stopped. I noticed it stopped but continued to cry because of a scary traumatic moment. After that the only thing that consistently happened was something shacking me so I can wake up in the morning, but that ceased after 5th grade. Will try to get some sleep now. Final story when I wake. Back in 2008 my 2 cousins, 2 friends from our neighborhood, and me. About 7:30 p.m. We had the great idea to enter his school and walk around. The school guard, old weird man, was pretty chill about it, but had one condition: do not break anything. Good for us. We enter the school and everything is dark, only moonlight lighting everything. I start having a bad feeling followed by shivers. Start roaming the hallways looking through the classroom's windows. Some friends start joking about how great it would be to see a ghost. Younger cousin walks upstairs to the 3rd floor. This is when shit hits the fan. Continue from his perspective. My younger cousin keeps looking around. Is his school, so there's nothing new around. Suddenly when coming back from the end of the hallway he hears a weird sound coming from his back. Scared as hell, so he starts running. He tries to come down the stairs as fast as possible. Falls down the mid-stairway. Not a hard fall, just starts falling downstairs with his ass coming down fast, so he falls forward on his chest when reaching the last stair. Still down he hears the weird sound again, this time from his right. Takes a quick look. Some meters away from him stands a big and tall dog. Tall as a Great Dane, big as a wolf, black fur and red eyes. This dog was walking towards him, panting and growling. He stands up and runs. Gets down the 2nd set of stairs without falling. Friend was going up the stairs when he shows up running down and taking his hand. "Let's get out of here," he screamed to us all. We see him coming down with my friend and he continues to scream, "Move out." We followed him running, everyone was scared. Get home, few houses from there. We sat on the sidewalk and he proceeded to tell the story. He was pale white. There have been a lot of stories about that school being haunted. Even the guard stays in a classroom, door shut and lights on all night. Not a surprise, in an almost desolated area of the school's backyard, on an abandoned corner there is an inverted pentagram on the wall, and at the base we found burned things several times. Maybe by now it has been already erased.
Static Spirit Guy here. I have another story I can tell. We'll start posting ASAP. Right. Anyway, this story is a told you so one. I had heard from my friend's father about it and never believed it until it happened to us. My friend and I am not sure what to think of it up till this day. I have known my friend since childhood, always going to his house or going out with him. His parents are pretty much my bros too. His mother is more reserved but often tells about her life before she was married. His father is a funny drunkard who likes to tell stories. Any kind of stories, really. He'd tell you about his past as an amateur football player. We often watch footy on the telly together, guys basically addicted to it. Would often tell about some spooky stories too. These are from the time when he lived in the countryside in a small town. He'd usually laugh at his own stories, but there was this one. One that always made him have this really serious look on his face when he told us. He even had a name for it. He called it the thing, not the story. The Wailer. He must have told me this story about 4 or 5 times. Before I continue, I must add that the area where my friend lived at the time looked kinda like Pick related. It's a heavily wooded area, but it's actually in the city, about 15 minutes away by car from the city center. His house was a bit more isolated than the others in the surrounding area, and it was on the foot of a slope, so getting a clear view of anything at night was really complicated. Anyway, as for the story. So, the Wailer. His father would say, as he started to scratch his head and look a bit worried.
Not something you want to experience, and there ain't much to tell. There's no mistaking it. When you hear it, you know for sure it's there. I first heard it back in my teens. I was by myself scaling some fish my father brought home earlier that day. That god-awful, whatever it is. As soon as I heard it, I knew I had to get out of there.
He told us about how he stormed out of his house and just kept running to the closest neighbor, which back then was like 4 kilometers away from him. He'd never finish the story or give more details. All he'd say was that it had happened in the night, and, as said previously, you'll know when you hear it. My friend and I would always burst into laughter by that time because his transition from boisterous drunkard to serious Sam face was hilarious to us back then. He'd sort of smirk when this happened and go to sleep, which pretty much meant to me that he was bullshitting us. And so, another day went by, his drunkard father going to sleep, and we going back to smoking in the garage after his parents went to bed. So we went to the garage to light up our cigs. Summer night, nothing unusual. It's about 2 in the morning. Talking about girls. Talking about games. Talking about life. When we hear a scream. Look at each other. Cue suspenseful music. The hell was that, I say, cigarette falling out of my mouth in cliché movie-like fashion and all. Not 5 seconds later. This god-awful, ear-piercing, high-pitched and prolonged cry of agony, anger, sorrow, or whatever. It sounds like it's coming from all sides, pretty weird, can't tell for certain where it is coming from. Friend is tactically shitting pants and close to the door already. WTF man, WTF are you doing? Not staying here, screw that. Hear the wail once more. Okay, screw that, I'm going inside too. We go to the backyard where we have a vision of his parents' room. They're sleeping like angels. What the hell, man? It's the booze, but then again, that should have woken them up. We go inside like cowards and remain inside for the rest of the entire night with all lights up. Later on, when his father finally woke up and asked us what happened, we just pretended to stay awake because we wanted to watch some movies. I'm not sure why we decided not to tell him about the event, but that's what we did. I don't think his father somehow asked someone to prank us. That was not like him at all, and he had told us that story multiple times before. I only heard it once. There are no foxes there and no other animals that I know of that could scream like that. This very friend of mine used to have a cat, so I know what they sound like when hurt. That was no cat or any animal of that kind. Also, there were no crackheads or stoners around the area.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.